welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And oh my, I didn't realize that we had the wonderfully talented actor Christian Bale in studio today playing the role of Jackson Keller. How you doing, Mr. Bale?
I tried to get a good role as Batman, and I used this voice, and I went home and cried to my wife that I did a stupid voice at the audition, and I wasn't going to get to be Batman. But Christopher Nolan's a crazy person and thought this was a good idea, so now I'm Batman.
Interesting. And how do you feel about the continued use of this voice throughout? And yes, I am going to see how long I can get you to do this voice in an effort to ruin your voice before the podcast starts.
I'm not falling for it. I'm already feeling bad.
Well, my hope, honestly, was that I could get you just fucking throw out your voice entirely, because we have not wildly differing opinions on this movie, but at least a little bit different. And if I can just drown you out because you can't talk, I'm gonna sound real smart this episode. Just being well, I think this, and you're like, I disagree, but you can't hear me.
Sean trying to overcome the battle of wills through underhanded tactics, and treachery.
The war was over before the battle even begun, okay? Sun Tzu said that.
And side note, unrelated to our ongoing discussion, apparently, from what I've heard, that story I told of the Batman voice, I think that actually happened. I need a source on it, but I remember seeing an interview with Christian Bale forever ago, where they asked him about the Bat voice, and he was like, man, I thought I really fucked that up at the audition. I remember telling the wife that. Thought I was never going to get called back, but here we are now.
3 movies later of and we're all better for it?
Memes are maybe better for it.
I'd say the college humor fucking videos making fun of it were always really good way back when.
Those are pretty damn memorable.
I have to tell this story. I saw The Dark Knight Rises on a midnight release. And I went with some friends from high school, and they did a Batman impersonation voice beforehand. And I, in my infinite wisdom, stood up to try and do it. It was clearly awful, because the only person in the audience who clapped was the friend I went with.
Oh no!
But that friend did give me a standing ovation, so he put himself out there. So there is that.
Supporting the fucking homies in 2008 or
and
2012.
I do feel like I need to support them back for that. So if you haven't, go to twitch.tv/thebeardedbait and give them a follow.
We'll actually get to our serious hashtag great podcast content in a minute here, folks. But I just want to say that I'm sure that my bat voice was terrible. Everyone in high school kept wanting me to do it though. So either they thought it was good by high school standards, of course, and that's why, or I looked like a chump and that's why they wanted me to do it. Probably the latter, if I'm being honest. But either way, I got some yucks. I ended up getting class clown in the yearbook, and Batman played no small part in that. So,
well, congratulations. I'm happy that we got a moment here to relive our high school days through the lens of Christian Bale's Batman.
We're here talking about The Dark Knight. Not The Dark Knight Rises, but I'd say the OG, but it's not really the OG. It's the second one in a rebooted series, but it's the only one anyone cares about because it's the only good movie of the 3.
Some would say. I haven't seen them in a long time. I remember liking the other two, and I remember telling you that I like The Dark Knight Rises, and you almost threw something at me as I was saying it. I just watched emotion well up behind your eyes, and I wouldn't even say anger. It was just disbelief and
We really have to do, eventually one day, we got to do The Dark Knight Rises. Batman Begins, for the record, I don't think Batman Begins is a bad movie. I think it's got a really strong first half, followed by a pretty mediocre second half. So I don't think it's that worth talking about on the show.
Fine.
Yeah. Dark Knight Rises, I'd really love to go back to. I only ever saw it the one time in the theaters and hated it so much because it was such a letdown after The Dark Knight, which, spoilers, is my favorite movie, and after this rewatch continues to be my favorite movie. So between this and the Inception episode, let it, if there was ever any doubt, I am the basic bitch Christopher Nolan fanboy, so you can trot that one out against me whenever you want.
Freshman year film student Jackson Keller.
That's me. But we're gonna do Dark Knight Rises eventually, because I wonder if I'd feel any differently about it now after the way that the superhero film landscape has changed. I don't know. So but that's not relevant to today. Sean, I've said my piece. Give yours then.
So I have a very weird relationship with this movie. Not as far as like Jackson loved it way back when. I watched it way back when. I remember really liking it back then. But I have not seen it in years. So this is the first time I've watched it in a really long time. And I'm conflicted because for every moment, for every piece of it that they just fucking knocked it out of the park with. I wouldn't even say for every piece of. I would say for every 5 pieces of just really fucking good work, there's one piece of it that just gets me in the exact opposite direction. And for that reason is why I'm hesitant to be yes, this movie fucking is really, really good. Because it is really, really good in a lot of ways, but not in the ways I think that I would like. That was not really a great sentence, but I'm going to stand by it.
I mean, it was coherent. It's a coherent thought.
But yeah, that's really what it boils down to is I liked it well enough. And there's just a lot of little things hanging on that kind of bother me in weird ways. Here's one that's not spoiler. I'm not super worried about spoilers with this movie anyway. But you mentioned that the MCU has kind of recontextualized a lot in terms of superhero movies. And I actually agree with you, but not for the same reasons. Because I think the MCU kind of recontextualized some of the action into this into less engaging, honestly.
You think the MCU has better action than this? Really?
Well, let me defend.
That's a spicy one. All right, let's go.
I'm not saying the action is better. I'm saying that there are comparisons to be made.
Okay, that's a more fair statement.
Because
I still disagree, but that's a more defensible statement.
Yeah. I was gonna say I never said that the action is better. I said that it has recontextualized the action of this movie. Okay. Because they're very different action set pieces. The MCU is very much about big and overblown and not being able to, kind of follow along with it in a lot of ways. Whereas this is way more deliberate and I was gonna say punchy, but my problem with it, I think, is that the action kind of there's something about it that didn't feel weighty to me. Something about thinking specifically. I'm gonna just to go as unspoilery as possible. The early scenes. With Batman just flipping around with Scarecrow's guys and just punching them and everything like that. There was something, I can't even quite put my finger on it, where it just didn't feel like it had that much of an impact to it. I never really felt I'm largely a pretty empathetic guy to on-screen violence. I can feel the pain or understand why that would hurt. And there were a couple later bone crunches where he snapped an arm ooh, grody. And that felt good and punchy. But this it didn't have the weightiness to it. And I don't know whether it was like the way the smacks were, like the weird Batman suit on face, like that just didn't make it the right satisfying sound for me, or whether I've just become inundated with the MCU's, like the MCU, for all of its faults, will say generally has a good punch. Like,
I disagree. I think that
Okay.
some of the MCU films do. Like the Russo brothers, the ones directed by the Russo brothers tend to. But like a lot of the other ones are super, super weightless.
well,
like
that's fair. I'm just saying, like, let's talk about the Russo brothers ones. in
sure.
particular.
Because
like,
that's probably the high standard for MCU action anyway. So.
Yeah, like I'm generalizing in a lot of ways here, but like I'm just trying to kind of generalize to get my point across in a way that doesn't, dive too much into the nitty gritty of in this scene in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Right.
But like there is like Marvel has done a good job, at least in some movies. You're welcome, Jackson. At like understanding like how to make a good punchy superhero scene. And like there were just some moments that I felt kind of like it wasn't as punchy as it could have been. And like that could, like, I think part of that is just like we have learned a lot from the time that this movie came out to now as to how to make more compelling superhero fight scenes. And once again, that's not all fight scenes. I don't count Doctor Strange in this. I need to put this out here because otherwise Jackson will jump on.
Well, let me tell you why I keep jumping up your ass after you're done. But make your point.
So like that's the big thing. It just like I feel like some of the punchiness is a little less weighty there. And like there, for all the shit that Jackson gives, like kind of the tongue-in-cheek glibness of the MCU during fight scenes, there was some kind of weird glibness that would crop up in a couple of the fight scenes here. It's way less prevalent, but it was still kind of just jarring when it would happen, mostly because it was so much less prevalent, and this movie was way more self-serious, and it deservedly so. Like, I'm not using self-serious as a way to knock the movie. It is a self-serious movie, and that is a good thing in this context. But like those quips would just kind of be like, wait, that was kind of weird and out of place. And like we'll talk about that because there's one scene in particular that Jackson and I think are gonna have a nice long hashing out about when we get into spoilers, but that's the skinny of it for now.
Sure. And so the reason I keep jumping up your ass is not to be like pedantic, but because like when I say that, like, the films by the Russo brothers, which is like 5 out of the like 20, like those are the only like Marvel movies that I could recall that have any sort of decent action. Like, God, do you remember the final scene of like Black Panther or like anything from Phase 1? Like that. So that's why I keep jumping your ass. Not because like, hashtag not all Marvel or whatever, but I think as a trend, like the films with talented punchy action in the MCU, in my opinion at least, are the vast minority.
That's fair. Plus, I am comparing your favorite movie to a series that you are far less a fan of. Like I get why you'd want to be like, well, hang on a second.
Well, it's so funny. Because, like, God, I was a big fan of some of those Marvel movies, and now here I am, like, basically full-blown, like, Zack Snyder troglodyte.
Release the Snyder cut. We're not actually part of that. If anyone is new to this, I don't care.
We're memeing here. Fuck the Zack Snyder movies. But I think the Zack Snyder movies are a good point of reference. Like, if we're comparing the moment to moment, like scenes where Batman beats up Mooks. Like, if you compare the scene, like this isn't really a spoiler since the very beginning. It's the first time Batman appears, the parking garage with like the
that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
So if you compare the parking garage to the scene towards the end of Batman vs Superman, where it's basically an extended Arkham fight sequence, like, definitely that Ben Affleck scene is a lot punchier and a lot stronger in terms of like the individual choreography of beating up mooks.
Hang on, I know what the problem is. I just
What?
figured it out. The problem is that when I think of like superhero movie punchiness, I'm looking at large scale like fights like that, like the Arkham fight at the end of Batman versus Superman, where like it's really well choreographed and you're not as focused on those single punches. And like the Dark Knight focuses way more on one-on-one. And so like I'm looking more for like John Wick punchiness rather than superhero punchiness.
And that I guess that's kind of what I was gonna say, and that I think you're right in that like some of the like action scenes where they're beating up mooks are lacking, but I think that the movie, for me, more than makes up for it in the amount of like memorable like set pieces and composition in some of those one-on-one sequences that like I can just like rattle off the top of my head. And this would be the difference even in like the MCU films with the better action, like with the exception of the elevator fight from Winter Soldier and the airport fight from Civil War, which even then, like, I don't remember the individual beats of the elevator fight at all. It's just more of the context and the scenario that made it more memorable. The airport fight did a better job of like showcasing the hero's powers and stuff. But so like beyond that, like I don't really remember individual moments from even the Marvel movies with like the good action. But here, I do remember, like, Batman flipping over the truck, like, the Joker, like, you know, going apeshit on Batman at the end, the Joker, like, pulling out the knife in his boot and, like, you know, giving him, like, a kick. Like, I remember a lot of these individual little moments, and full disclosure, a lot of that's probably because I've seen this movie, like, 20 times.
I was just gonna say that, actually.
But the fact that I still maintain the fact that even now, like 10 years later, 20 views later, still get completely engrossed in like the flow of this movie and just can't take my eyes away from the screen, I think speaks highly that it's doing something right. Yeah.
No, I mean, and once again, like, I think this is kind of directed at both you and the people who would be listening to this, is like, with all of my criticisms of this movie, keep in mind that I'm not saying that like it is a bad movie or it is a fault of the movie or like endemic of the movie as a whole. It's way more like these are moments of it that didn't work for me and subsequently kind of hampered my viewing experience of it. But like that's not to take away from everything else that this movie does so fucking well. And so like you're right that there is a lot outside of these moments that are very, very good, and I'm not gonna take it away from that. But like I can't, you know, just say I don't like this scene. The rest of it's great though, because like that's not who we are as a podcast, to be perfectly honest. Like we have to dig into like those moments and kind of further explain why. And like once again, that's not saying though that other moments in it are bad or suffer for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although I might like disagree with one assertion, and that's that like, so for me, the fact that like Batman punching the mooks isn't super memorable. There are a lot of things that I'll agree with you. Like I'm not sitting here trying to claim that the movie is perfect. It is certainly not. But
yes, you are. Excuse you. I'm going to put words in your mouth just so that I can get mad at you about this. Yes, you are.
I can feel your anger. Anyway, so you know, I'm not sitting here trying to claim the movie is perfect. But like in terms of like what I would register as a flaw in my estimation, like Batman beating up on the mooks not being as satisfying as like Batman versus Superman wouldn't really register as a flaw to me, just because like in the overall flow of the scene and in the flow of the sequence, it's much less important than like everything else that's going on. And I think that I would prefer if like action movies were more focused on kind of delivering on the big moments and the memorable set pieces, as opposed to kind of like hyper. I mean, all right. Here's the best comparison I can give. Right. So you have the Star Wars original trilogy, and you have the Star Wars prequels,
And of course, the holiday special.
and of course the holiday special. Now, leaving the sequel trilogy aside, because I think that it strikes a better balance of like modernity and like character. You have the like lightsaber duels between Vader in Empire and Jedi, and you have the lightsaber duels between like Darth Maul. Now, the Darth Maul fight is an exceptionally well choreographed action sequence, like beat for beat, blow for blow. But I would still say that the fights against Vader in episodes 5 and 6 are much better in my mind, just because of the way that those fights like convey character and like visual storytelling, like particularly the Empire battle when like Luke's kind of using his newfound powers and like trying to get the like jump on Vader, and Vader, like you can see it in his movements that like he's barely putting in like any effort at all while Luke's going like ape shit on him. And so I think that makes for a better fight scene, even though like strictly speaking, the choreography and like the moment to moment, like punch for punch action of it is not as well executed as like the Darth Maul fight. And that would be, again, not saying that all the action in The Dark Knight is perfect, but in that way, I would say it's more like the original Star Wars films in that the action sequences are more part of the overall story. And like usually a lot of those like bigger moments are indicative of character in some way. And so that's why I think that it's stronger than even the strongest like choreographed like Marvel or even modern DC movie. And that's why it sticks with me more.
But here's my counterpoint to that, because you're right. I don't disagree with you on any of those points. The one-on-one scenes, like the scenes that really stand out in this movie, arguably aren't as much about the fighting in a lot of ways. The knife boot is probably the exception to that. Like, let's just take a moment here and take a look at the parking garage scene again. We're not gonna leave the first 5 minutes of this movie. All right, this is where we're fucking planting our flag here, at least until we get past fucking spoilers. Because like what that scene is supposed to convey is we have a bunch of fake Batmans, the fake hedgehogs, so to speak. And they pretty much show up and get their ass handed to them in a lot of ways. And like you want the real Batman to show up, the real Batman please stand up, and come in and kick some serious ass. And like you expect him to have a little bit more punch to it, because like you want to show just the difference between the fakes and the reals. And like the fact that the punchiness isn't there, I think kind of undermines that a little bit.
In this particular instance, you are definitely right.
One for Sean.
Yeah, no, 100%. I with a caveat. And so firstly, I think that the parking garage scene is probably like the weakest like action sequence in the film. Pretty much exactly for that reason, in that like this is a space where like the like attention to character detail is not meeting up with the actual choreography like it is in a lot of the other sequences. That said, I still think that it gets the job done in that regard. There are like one or two things that Batman does that are pretty cool, like when he, bends the shotgun on the fake Batman that the fake Batman has, and when he Goomba stomps the car in particular, I think is pretty memorable. But this also gets into the humor thing. And see, I think for me, this movie has the perfect balance of seriousness and humor. There are some moments of unintentional comedy, one of which I would call a great flaw during that we'll talk about in spoilers, like a great flaw during an otherwise like emotional sequence. But usually I don't find the jokes that distracting. Like usually the little like quips, and they're pretty dry too a lot of the time. They're not quite like Whedon-y quips. And even when they fall flat, is usually in an awkward way that's like unintentionally funny and makes for a great meme. The the prime example being in the parking garage scene where the little like bitch boy Batman fake hedgehog is saying like, what separates me from you? And Batman goes, I'm not wearing hockey pads. And like it's like that's a decent enough quip, but like the fact that like Christian Bale can barely talk and like really struggles to deliver it makes it so fucking awkward.
It's also like his first line of the movie, isn't it?
like it's in his first 5 lines for sure. But either way, it ends up being like unintentionally funny, which still makes me laugh. So there you go. Like I like that. Like some of the things. Like I said, I won't claim that the movie doesn't have flaws, and some of them are quite serious that actively like hurt the movie's otherwise excellent script, which is my big takeaway, is that I was worried coming back and rewatching it, is that the accusation it gets is like, oh, the movie itself isn't that good. Everyone's just so spellbound by Heath Ledger, and I was worried about that too. I'm like, oh man, like, is it really just like Heath? Is that performance carrying the whole movie? And I think absolutely not. I think that the script really fucking great, really fucking nuanced, addresses a lot of awesome themes while still being exciting, with excellent pacing and all that other stuff. So, but yeah, like the hockey pad scene is unintentionally funny in a way that I find stupid and charming and still memorable. So
fair. Well, let's dive into spoilers so we can talk about the other humor scenes. We'll use that as our segue. And also we need to talk about spoilers because it's already been 30 fucking minutes and we haven't even begun. So before we do, let's just talk about what we're going to be watching next week, which is Ad Astra. And I am so excited about this movie. This is like peak my shit. I'm sure I'm going to love it. I really hope. God, I hope so. It's space drama. That's what I want. I want space drama. All right. So come back for next week for that. For now, you want to talk about spoilers?
Let's talk about spoilers.
Let's talk about that scene. It's the scene that literally everyone knows. It's the car scene. So, to set the stage, if you are somehow unfamiliar, at this point, Harvey Dent has claimed to be the Batman and is driving via police internment to another location, and in the middle of the convoy, the Joker shows up and starts shooting up shit. And so Batman gets in his crawler, I believe it's what it's called in this one.
I think this is the Tumbler until it blows up still, which is a dumb name, but
I can never remember. It changes like every fucking 3 years.
Yeah.
So this is the Tumbler, and unfortunately you're not allowed to post porn on it anymore. But
dicks out.
Following that, we get the scene of Batman on the Bat bike and trying to run down the Joker. So, what is the humor that you're thinking of?
The one that breaks it.
Yes.
In this case. Yeah. Oh, it's definitely the scene with the kids in the car.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say we need to. I think I want to talk about this scene from when the Tumbler breaks up, to right where before he does the hit me thing. So first and foremost, and this does not matter in the least, I'm really upset that it doesn't say batastrophic failure instead of catastrophic failure. That was just something I was thinking about while I was watching it.
You're canceled. The podcast is canceled. Go home, everybody.
Oh, it was like one of those things where I'm like, that'd be like, you don't even really see the console. It would just been like a cute little like almost nod to the Adam West era.
Yeah, that would be cute, but continue.
So that, but then after he ejects, this is where it kind of starts to grate on me in a little bit of weird ways, and it's going to actually segue into my second point, but we'll get to that in probably like another half an hour. So like when he ejects in the bat cycle, the car says goodbye, which is just like a weird thing that kind of jumped out at me as kind of feeling it's just out of place. Like the humor in this, like this scene in particular, just kind of feels strange and out of place because, as I said, this movie is very self-serious, and so like for it to be like goodbye was just odd because it was a very tense scene, and there hadn't really been any humor in this scene before this, and then you get the goodbye, and then you immediately get the kids, and like the kids is just buck wild because so the kids are sitting in like their mom's van or something, parents nowhere to be seen, and they're just going like pew pew, finger guns, bam 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 bam, blowing up cars with their minds and stuff like that, like kids do before we ran into a gun crisis in America. And while they're doing this, they suddenly watch cars start to explode as Batman flies by on he might have actually still been in the Tumbler at that point, wasn't he?
I think he was on the bat cycle.
Okay, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. The point remains that he's just blowing up a shit ton of cars, blows past these kids. These kids are like, whoa, that was Batman. And like, it's so fucking surreal because it instantly recontextualized that people might have been in those cars.
So, you know, this is especially egregious because this whole movie, like the central internal conflict is whether or not like the Joker is despicable enough to justify Batman breaking his one rule, which is not to kill, and whether like that is the right thing to do, and what value morals and ethical codes like that even have. So the fact that like they have Batman blowing up all these cars for a yuck, and definitely one that's like, this is much more of like a Marvel joke. It's not really like, there's some dry humor throughout, but like this is probably the furthest into the slapstick zone that we go. And it's all the stranger because like, yeah, if Batman had just like aimed his cannon a little like 2 centimeters to the right, he'd have some dead kids on his hands. I mean, thank God no one was in those parked cars like texting.
What's some dead kids between friends? Am I right?
Am I right, gamers? And so yeah, that's a huge glaring scene. If only because it runs so counter to what the rest of the movie does so well in terms of its conflicts and its themes and its morals, etc. Yeah, no, you'll hear no argument from me about this scene with the kids being bad. They could have like, I think what works much better is like the guy who's like cleaning out his tooth with like a toothpick or whatever and like looking in the side mirror, and then like it snaps off as Batman goes between the cars with the bat cycle, because that's
redundant at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's redundant. That's much cleverer. And
also doesn't have the threat of murder.
No, exactly. Like that's the kind of collateral damage that seems except like within Batman parameters, you know.
And like it's also like the close shave because like his head was just out the window. Like, wow, that almost took me out, but he was careful, as opposed to literal explosions with gunfire next to children.
Yeah, I mean, put me in charge of the editing. Like that scene goes for sure.
Yeah. So like, I'm gonna use segue into my other problem with this. But I do, just to appease the Mad God Jackson, need to say that a lot of the rest of this scene is very, very good. I like the truck flip. I like the Joker shooting shit up. Like all that flows real nicely. It's really good. I like this scene a lot.
The Mad God Jackson. Burn them all, the Mad King. Sorry, continue.
If by them you mean my opinions on this movie, then yes. So my hang up, that it's once again like it's this scene that kind of really drove the point home for me, is that Batman feels really out of place in this universe. Mostly because, like, I think I can chalk it up to technically 3 reasons, but I'm not going to harp on one of them because, LOL, his voice is silly, am I right, guys?
Which isn't to say it's it isn't distracting or a valid criticism. It's just a pretty well-worn one.
I was gonna say that's been a criticism since this movie came out, and is not worth talking about anymore.
You're not gonna find me defending the Bat voice. So,
but I think what might be 2 more potentially relevant criticisms of it are, 1, he is the only person in this movie with like super advanced technology, and so like. There's an element of just with this movie being so grounded in reality, and I keep going back to that but like it's a really important point to my thesis of he feels out of place because everything else is super grounded in reality. Like everything else feels like it could theoretically happen within Gotham. It's a constant extension, but his fucking gadgets just feel so otherworldly in comparison to the banality of the rest of Gotham's citizens. Which I know, like that's Batman's shtick through and through. But like when it's supposed to be so realistic, the fact that he can like the bat cycle, I think, is where I really draw the line. Because initially, I always thought it just like launched out of the front of it. I didn't realize that it popped out on one wheel and then righted itself into 2 wheels. Like it's the front wheels that center him into the middle of it. And like there's just something about that that's just like so fucking alien to that technology that I'm just like, what the fuck am I actually looking at? And then subsequently, also with the Bat Cycle, because of course it's with the Bat Cycle, Batman also exists in a place where he is really the only thing that gets a lot of CGI done to him, or at least noticeable CGI. And so he kind of sits in this weird place where he feels like that alienates him a little bit as well, just because everyone else doesn't have that same CGI experience. So like your mind notices that like, hey, this person is slightly different in, not only doing things that are not humanly possible, but also sometimes just straight up not real. And like that came to a head for me, and I'm laughing at this already because this thing is fucking stupid. But when he rides up the wall and then like does a flip under the bike and is somehow facing the other way, and like it's so weirdly CGI and looks so fucking goofy, I'm like, what the fuck just happened there? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And I remember actually that scene, it was the one moment where it did take me back. I'm like, wait, what? Like where I didn't even understand the mechanics of what was going on completely. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like as opposed to just having him turn around like a normal fucking human being and do a Yui, he rides one wheel of his motorcycle up the fucking wall, and then the entire thing flips, and he's facing the other way. And I don't mean flips vertically, I mean flips horizontally, and he's facing the other way. Explain that one, liberals.
Sean destroys Libcuck Batman with facts and logic.
What can I... You know what? They shouldn't make it so easy for me. You know what? This is going on YouTube, clipped right now. It's going to be all over the place. It's viral marketing, baby.
Yeah, so I think I'm glad you pointed to the Bat Cycle specifically. Because with this specific example, I can get more extend the olive branch here, get more on your level. I'm mostly willing to overlook it because I think the Bat Cycle is sick. But like there definitely are those moments where like when the wheels do the like rolling like sideways thing, or when he does the stupid flip on the wall, like that's definitely a little overboard. Other than that though, I think that like actually like I think his gadgets aren't too far outside of the realm of reality. Like some of them are pushing it, but
like it is really the more I think about it, like even as I was saying it, I'm like, it's the fucking Bat Cycle. It's the Bat Cycle, like the tumbler into Bat Cycle that bothers me. And I think it's mostly the fucking alien ass wheels, because wheels don't work that way.
Yeah, like that's probably the one that pushes the bounds of reality the most, because other than that, like, there's the sonar, which is, maybe a little sci-fi, but not out of the bounds of, like, what you could do with, like, military technology.
Like, I was actually thinking about that, and, like, I was thinking about using that as an example, but, like, I caught myself because I'm like, that actually isn't that wild. It's strange in universe, but, like, in a way that I could buy.
So, and I think this sort of segues into sort of how I feel, and that I agree to a point, but I think that part of that is necessary for the themes of the movie to work, because
There's that buzzword.
there it is. I was waiting for this moment, baby.
Hello, Editor Sean here, and on this version of Hey, We Fucked Something Up, I have a very special guest with me.
Is it me?
It's Jackson.
So, you've heard many tales of the crap top by now. I've mentioned it on the show. It's ruined a few Twitch streams. It's a legend at this point. So imagine my surprise when yesterday, when we recorded our normal time, about The Dark Knight, about my favorite movie of all time, no less. I saved the file, and my computer's just like, lol, no, you didn't. And it only saved about half of it. And the truly horrifying thing about this is that it cut off pretty much exactly at the point where Sean and I's battle of wills sort of gives segue to me standing atop my bat pulpit and preaching to the choir about themes and shit, which was such a stunning, moving plea for this movie's case that Sean even made jokes about how, that whole big long silence you just heard was me deleting all of Jackson's great, insightful commentary so he doesn't get any points in the debate, and it was a good bit. We laughed, we had some fun. If only we had known that Sean wouldn't have to delete them and that they would delete themselves.
There was like an inkling in the back of my mind, because we've been running into audio issues up to this point, where I'm like, oh god, I really hope that this isn't like some ill portend, that like this fucking joke I'm making. But like, it seemed like it was working no problem. Like, even as it was happening, like, okay, well, things are being weird, but it's saving no problem. Let's just keep rolling with it. And then I look at it today, I'm like, oh, Jackson's audio is like 20 minutes shorter than mine. That's not good.
And I did everything I could to try and recover it. I dug around in the temporary files. I tried to reconstruct it from the Audacity data folder. I did what I could, but it wasn't doing it. This ain't it, Chief. So here we are. I'm gonna try and give my same impassioned analysis again. And, of course, it won't be as good this time. So, this is basically defeat. I'm throwing in the towel already.
Yeah, whatever. There's fucking themes and shit. Who cares? We're done. Roll credits.
So, to pick up where we left off.
Just a day later, and 20 minutes of audio shorter.
I was talking about how Sean's point about the Batman, the Batman, as they insistently call him, with the definite article,
like the Ohio State University,
like the Ohio State University. It's simple. We kill the Ohio State University. That was nothing. So
listen. All right, I'm gonna cut us off right here because we have lost all sense of flow just right from the get go. We're just like we're trying to pick up here fucking cold, and it is clearly a terrible idea.
Themes. I could do this. I live for theme. I inject theme directly into my veins. And this movie's got some hella interesting fucking themes, some hella nuanced themes that it doesn't get credit for. And in fact, you know what? You already heard kind of where I was going before the intermission. So let's point to where this conversation originally went, and that is the meme. And I really can only call it a meme. I suppose it's a fair reading of the story. But it sort of became like kind of film shorthand to dismiss the movie. Like, oh man, like, did you know The Dark Knight is actually like war on terror propaganda? And on the surface, it's very easy to see how you would come to that conclusion. On the one hand, like, Batman, as he's presented, is more like gritty incarnations. I won't say like inherently, of course. Batman's been many things over many eras. But the grim and gritty, like, starting with Frank Miller version of Batman that The Dark Knight obviously pulls from, is kind of a fascist. This is not a new observation. Even Morgan Freeman himself kind of glibly says it when the lawyer guy is confronting him, like, you think that, this billionaire playboy is a vigilante who spends all his days, like, beating criminals to a pulp and breaking their bones with his bare hands in the streets, and you want to blackmail this person? Like, good luck, buddy. So the movie even acknowledges it, right? Even if, again, this isn't like the over-the-top, like, Frank Miller Batman from that one, like, infamous panel where he's calling Robin the R-word. But, like, this is, there's still those undertones. Like, Batman uses the mass surveillance to end up catching the Joker. Like, his going outside the law, like, motivated by, doing what's right. You doing like extrajudicial like extraditing of like Chinese citizens even. All very George W. to say the least. And it isn't just Batman. Harvey Dent.
I was gonna say there's quite a line that is telling in it, and like this is when at watching the movie, it was kind of like picking up some of these vibes in a weird way.
Yeah, so Harvey Dent, there are two big moments. I can't remember the exact way the line is phrased, but he's like, Gotham needs to show that it'll never like give in to terrorist demands or something. Like it's
they basically straight up say we do not negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah, I think they literally say that actually. Yeah. And the other moment that's very telling is the discussion that they're having at dinner about Rome, where Harvey Dent basically comes out in favor of a dictatorship to clean up the crime in the city, where he's talking about, the Romans, they'd elect, they'd suspend democracy in times of crisis to preserve it, like, strength through unity through faith, like basically. And Rachel's like, yeah, that man was named Julius Caesar, and he never gave it back. So it's not like the movie isn't aware of how this comes across. And even though like Harvey and Batman are doing like real good in the city, like there isn't really much arguing that, like from the text, although insofar as like their motivations and their desire to clean up the city, like that's true. But when you actually look at the characters themselves, the situation and their impact is certainly much more complicated, and the narratives of these people have sort of superseded the people themselves in the eyes of Gotham. And I think that the movie is heavily critical of these like so-called great men of history, and I think that that's part of the importance of Batman being so separate from everybody else, because as far as I'm concerned, you have like even like Commissioner Gordon, who is like a famous Batman character, like, very well known. Like Gary Oldman's performance is very, very subdued. Like he's very much a normal guy, but even compared to how bombastic Dent, even pre-Two-Face, to say nothing of when he has his fall, and Batman, and even like Bruce Wayne putting on his Playboy affect is another kind of narrative. So once again, this is a movie all about narratives. Of course, I like this movie because it's about narratives, and it doesn't try to hide this. Because there's that speech at the end about like Batman can be what he needs to be. He's a symbol, a silent guardian, like all that shit. And I think that the ending is complicated and doesn't have any sort of real answers for us. And And when you actually stop and look at the totality of the ending, and this is ignoring Rises, right? Like, this is looking at the movie as a, like, complete individual work, which I think it very much stands on its own without its prequel or sequel. And so the situation is you have these three larger-than-life personalities, like, each with their own narratives, like Harvey Dent, straight-laced, like, by the book, Gotham's White Knight, the savior that it needs. You have Batman, who also filled that hero role, but then, you know, thanks to public perception, the narrative sort of shifts around him when the Joker comes in and influences it. And now the Joker doesn't have quite the same sort of narrative in the public. Like, he's not admired, but he is feared and he is hated. And the Joker, more than anyone else, is aware of, like, how he's spinning his narrative. Like, the whole point of his scheme is to try and prove, or rather to try and make the people of Gotham believe that his narrative is the correct one. That's really all he cares about, is, like, proving that he's right. And so I always take a little bit of issue with the fact that people say that this particular incarnation of the Joker is less of a character and more of a force of nature. I really disagree with that, because he like you can see moments where, like, he gets flustered, like, you can kind of see where the act, like, drops for a bit and he kind of reveals a lot of the, like, boiling rage underneath. The fact that he's so effective at lying and selling his narrative, in fact, that he managed to trick a good portion of the audience, and that a lot of people will criticize the movie by pointing to the scene where Joker's talking to Harvey Dent in the hospital bed, and he's like, do I really look like a guy with a plan? And everyone's like, oh, well, of course you have plans, Joker. Like, yeah, like, you do look like a guy with a plan. Like, that's bad writing, because all of his, like, you know, individual, like, schemes and gambits are so intricate. But that's the intentional, like, contradiction of the character. That's like, being a human being is the act of, like, having this ideology of, like, chaos and yet needing, like, this perfectly meticulous order in order to achieve it. Like, that's just that's the kind of, like, contradictions at the heart of a character that make them a character. And I think that's what sets the Joker apart from a lot of these sort of other pure chaos characters. The one that I mentioned yesterday, and I'll do it again here, is Majin Buu from Dragon Ball Z, who's just, like, a big pink rage monster. And Sean, you could roast me for that now.
I was gonna say, yesterday I cackled aloud. Today I can only shake my head in silence.
the appropriate response. But yeah, so like, that's what the Joker's trying to do. He's trying to sell his narrative, and that's why Batman keeping to his narrative and keeping to his role is so important. As far as the, like, you know, Batman doesn't kill thing. Like, that's why it's more important here than any other movie. And the thing about the movie is that, in terms of selling the narrative, the Joker pretty much wins, like, in that final confrontation. Like, this is an absolute failure for Dent, Batman, and Gordon. Dent, obviously, a completely fallen hero. All of his crimes have to be covered up, and, you know, Batman has to take the heat. Batman has to break his rule after spending the entire movie trying to, you know, avoid killing the Joker, despite having so many opportunities to do so. The fact that he kills Harvey Dent in an action as simple as, like, tackling him off of a couple stories of building to save Gordon's son. Real fucking downer when you think about it, especially when, like, if this was what it was going to amount to anyway, he could have just gunned down the Joker on that bike and that would have been it. But so, you know, Batman has pretty much failed. And really the only way that the Joker doesn't fail is through the ordinary people of Gotham, through the scene where the boats where the prisoners you know, the big tough dude is like, you know, you better give that to me. I'll do what you should have did 10 minutes ago. Throws the detonator out the window. Extremely fucking great moment. Like just the amount of pathos and humanity there that I think the movie has sort of gone out of its way to not show the criminals for a long time, in order to maybe condition us to try and buy into the Joker's narrative of, like, you know, the good civilians on the boat. Well, you know, these are just criminals, like, they've had their chance, like, we should get to go free. And, like, that one guy, like, you can't even blame him for saying that, like, you know, in that situation. That's, you know, that's a pretty perfectly reasonable line of thinking. But even he, like, his greater humanity, like, when it comes time to actually do it and prove the Joker right, you know, he can't do it. His greater humanity steps up at the last minute. And so, like, the ordinary people of Gotham are able to prove the Joker wrong, even though, like, in stark contrast to the way our supposed heroes, our supposed, like, icons, have completely failed. And I think that it's interesting that, you know, by having the movie end on a lie, I've been thinking about this a lot, and in some ways, I guess I'm glad that we had the extra time to do this other take, because I've been thinking about comparing this to Inception, whereas in Inception, the lie is presented as like a good thing, kind of like a postmodern. If you can't truly distinguish like what is real and what is reality, if we can't ever truly know if we're on the top layer, then the story is all there is, then the story is all that matters. But this is kind of the other side of that coin, right? Where, you know, you have Batman sort of taking the fall for Dent's crimes, and it's not really good for anyone involved. It's such a tenuous piece. I mean, if we do want to include The Dark Knight Rises, that's like immediately broken in that movie. Like, Batman's personal reputation is, of course, destroyed. He's punished Bat at this point, a fallen legend. Dent, like, all just to... Dent's legacy is on, like, a razor's edge, and the only way it sustains itself is through a lie, because if the truth was known, then, like, because the people lionized him so much as a symbol, that would undo everything. And so really, like, what I'm seeing here, is, like, contrary to what I think a lot of the criticism is, that this is, like, a pro-Batman, like, fascist sort of movie that really lionizes the heroes, I think that it has a very critical eye towards these, like, great, big, powerful, imposing, like, larger-than-life figures, because I think that, like, the actions of these characters, like, you know, whether it's Batman or Dent or the Joker, all of them are trying to sell a story. And when, like, the details of that story don't completely line up for the public, like, that's when you start to experience problems. That's when that's when kind of the order starts to break down, when people invest so much of themselves into kind of the legacy of this iconic figure. And so for me, like, that's why I really like that Batman, like, sort of stands out. Because, like, when I think of those scenes where him and the Joker are just, like, talking alone, my two absolute favorite scenes, like, after the Batman's got him suspended from the grappling hook and in the interrogation room, that's another thing pointing to the fact that this isn't, like, a pro-George Bush movie, by the way, is that Batman definitely, like, you know, he beats the shit out of Joker in the interrogation, completely loses his mind, and absolutely fails. He falls for the Joker scheme, plays right into his hands. The torture doesn't work. And so, so when I see those scenes of just those two characters interacting alone, for me, that it makes the intensity so much greater, and it adds a real, like, it makes the accusations that the Joker is making about Batman, that he's just a freak like him, and that, like, they're both sort of beyond the normal, and therefore, like live to different standards. Like oftentimes when movies do the or any story do the, you know, oh, you, the hero, you and I are the same. It comes across as really stupid and hollow, but I think that larger than lifeness, and a lot of the visual contrast between like the dark colors of Batman and like, you know, the pure black versus the Joker's like bright face and white face and purple suit, makes for a really effective emphasis of like, yes, like these are not ordinary men, but that is not a good thing. And I think that the movie, like through sort of observation, at best you could say that it's reluctant to accept the roles of like the hero in society. Like it maybe like Batman covering up Dent's crimes to keep the peace. Like that was probably the best play they could have made in that given situation, but it still is an uncomfortable feeling. And it, like I said, it's just on a razor's edge there. And so that I think is the main thematic thrust. And so while, yes, I agree that there are a lot of ways, often in not good ways, like, you know, I've definitely made concessions to the way Batman himself is portrayed. I also think that some of that Batman otherness is intentional and is important for the overall like theme of the movie.
Yeah, you done?
I just wanted to give my lecture.
No, I know. That's why I was just letting you talk. I'm not gonna jump into anything more, just because, as I said, we don't really have the same flow as last time. I just mostly wanted to give Jackson a chance to shine, because he did have some really good salient points, and I didn't want to deprive any of you from hearing them, because Jackson is a smart man, and his fucking professorial lecture deserves to be heard.
Aw, why thank you, Sean. Are you going on your way to be nice to me so you don't curse this recording?
You know what? There might be a little bit of that in there, but there's some earnestness to it, you know? You got to support, but also please don't kill this recording.
Well, I do have one last point, since we did there was one thing that we were talking about yesterday that I wanted to touch on again, and make sure that it was out there as like a public statement, is like, after watching this movie again, that's why like I've been interested in the new Joker movie, like cautiously interested, but after seeing what they did with that character, you know, what the Nolan brothers, what Heath, what, you know, everyone involved in the production did to make such a like layered, menacing, terrifying villain. Nobody could live up to that, I don't think. Like, certainly not in my eyes. As long as I live, I'm gonna be a Heath fanboy till the day I die. But with the new Joker movie, like, I'm still interested to see it, but I think that, like, this point that, you know, the Dark Knight makes about these, like, larger-than-life personalities, I think is so effective, that the fact that so many people, like, bought into the Joker story and, like, started to idolize him, I think is almost like a self-demonstrating, like the movie is kind of demonstrating what it's preaching in there about kind of hero worship, even when it's like towards the villain, like if it's about who's selling their stories, you know, the fact that the Joker wins pretty much can't deny that that's an effective way of selling a story, and that's super hella uncomfortable, and it's also wonderfully rich and nuanced, and I just don't see how the modern DC films who took the surface level of the Dark Knight and just made it into the modern DC universe of sad boys and yelling, I don't know how they could possibly make something that comes even a tenth as close to what the Dark Knight achieved with that character. And that's about it from me.
Well, I'm gonna kick it back to yesterday, Sean and Jackson, then, because we do actually have the audio from the finale ready. So thanks for indulging us, and apologies that we kind of fucked this whole thing up. Hopefully this weird interjection does not come across as super weird and doesn't sound really weird and out of flow from our usual stuff.
I'm glad I'm glad I had the opportunity to stand atop my pulpit for a bit, so that's nice.
We got the important things in here.
Yeah, you're not missing anything substantial. We probably missed some good yucks and some good quips, but there's no way to get them back, so no use crying over spilled milk.
Sorry. Before Jackson starts talking about the Joker movie again, I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/helpus_Skippy. You can also find my writing over at 25yearslatersite.com. I just did a whole early review of Borderlands. I've got an early review of Link's Awakening coming out next weekend. I'm still talking about Preacher every week. There's a lot going on over there for me.
And I've been your host, Jackson Keller. You can find me over on twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. Except when my computer makes my stream a PowerPoint presentation like it did the other day. Not a great endorsement, but you should stop by anyway, because when it's running smoothly, it's a damn good time.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you want to torture us, I was gonna say you can follow us on Twitter. That doesn't make any sense. But you still can follow us on Twitter. We're at BADH_cast. Let you know when we're going live with updates and stuff like that. I really am going to try and start using that Twitter account more. So I'm gonna try and make jokes and stuff on it. Go follow it. It's gonna be worth your time. If you do want to torture us, though, you can join our Discord. That is, however, Patreon exclusive. So if you want to give us $1 a month, or just $1, that's fine too. You can get access to it and go hang out in the Discord. At $5 a month, you get access to our bonus episodes. We have a bunch of really good bonus episodes, and we still need one for next month. So if you have any suggestions, hit us up. We're looking for something short and sweet, like a movie or a short anime or a 5-hour cute game or something like that. Please get at us. And at $10, you get to choose those bonus episodes. I know that kind of contradicts what I just said, but you guys get priority. And we're currently through all of our $10 patrons right now. We're going to start doing $10 patrons again in 2 months. But we're just trying to open it up for other people's suggestions right now. And you also get a little something extra as well. And this is where Jackson would usually take over, but we've been having a hell of a time with audio this recording. So I'm just going to finish it up and say thank you to Autumn Keller, Summer Skaggs, Julia, and Travis. That is what you also get for being a $10 patron. You get a special little shout out at the end because you guys are all fucking wonderful. Thank you so much. Mwah. Chef kiss to all of you. Wonderful, wonderful people. And also, thanks to Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go give them a listen wherever you can. Buy their music. Support them in any way possible. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com for the endorsement and having our fucking links on their site and everything like that. They're a bunch of really cool people doing some really cool writing. And I'm not just talking about myself, because there are people way more talented than I am doing way better writing on that site. So you should go click it for all that good stuff. It's gaming news, movie reviews, gaming reviews, TV reviews, interviews. There's more than just that too. There's some wrestling stuff on there. There's a lot of shit on that site that you should definitely go check out. Next week, as I said, we're going to be watching Ad Astra. And I'm really excited for that. So come back then. Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go